Late autumn, 1942, North Atlantic, between Iceland and Greenland. HMS Valor, a lean destroyer, escorts a weary convoy through seas already hungry for steel. The crew expects wolves, German U-boats, but sonar finds something else. Too big, too slow, too wrong. Dead fish blanket the water, ships vanish without a sound, and whispers spread of a serpent below. What came next was something we never thought possible. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. We were a lean destroyer, fast when the screws had teeth, mean when the guns were fed, and always tired. She smelled of oil, old coffee, and lads who had been cold too long. Paint flaking, rivets sweating rust, but she was ours. We knew every ladder by touch, every door by the way it stuck, every pipe by the rattle it made when the sea slapped the hull. Our job was simple to say and hard to live: keep the merchant boys breathing. They hauled food and fuel and the bits that make bombs and planes. The Grey Wolves, German U-boats, wanted to starve them and us. So we zigzagged in front and along the sides, listening with our sonar set, eyes hurt from staring into spray, always ready to drop the cans or spit fire from the guns. Days blurred. Routines kept the fear from eating our guts. Dawn stations. Breakfast that was more tin than taste. Wet socks hung near heaters that never warned anything. Stokers swore at the boilers like they were stubborn mules. The cooks made tea thick enough to patch leaks. The coxswain shouted until he coughed out his voice and then shouted more. The lads cleaned everything twice, then smoked, then cleaned again. That is how you keep a ship alive: scrape, polish, swear, repeat. We drilled like madmen. Fire drill, collision drill, man overboard. Action stations until our legs shook. We learned to sleep standing because orders and alarms came at all hours. The mess talk was dirty and stupid and brave. Someone always had a story about a girl back home with a smile that could bend steel. Someone else had a story about a bloke who took a splinter and bled out in a minute because the sea does not wait. We laughed too loud because the water was louder. The convoy moved like tired cattle, big slow bellies full of hope. We called them freighters, liners, tramps, rust buckets. They were all just targets with lights off. When the weather let up, you could see them, boxy shadows on a flat gray sheet. When the weather turned, which was most of the time up there, you saw nothing but waves stacked like houses in sky the color of old battleship paint. The XO kept morale with cards and singing, and one tin of peaches he swore we would share on Christmas. The skipper was cool as a stone. He never raised his voice, never showed the shake. He had a way of patting the rail like you would a horse. The young officers tried not to look green. We called them butter bars anyway. Old habits. Army slang stuck to us for no good reason. Made us feel like we were all in the same mess of a war. At night, the ship talked. The deck creaked. The hull popped inside. The rudder hummed when the coxswain swung her around. The sonar boys. Back then we still said the old name half the time, the ping gear. The set sat with headphones pressed to their skulls, like they were trying to squeeze the ocean into their ears. Ping, ping, ping down, ping. They would call bearing and range like prayers. If they lost contact, they would slap the casing, curse the set, curse the war, then listen harder. We joked about sea monsters when the wind dropped and we had a minute. Old sailor stuff. Kraken this, Leviathan that. Norse tales picked up from Icelandic fishermen over a cup that was not tea. We laughed, said the only monsters were men, and the ones that swim have torpedoes. You laugh because if you do not, the sea will taste the fear on you. I slept in a rack that always smelled a bit like curry from a spill that happened months before. My kit was in a bag under my head. My rifle lived by my side like a dog. My wool was always damp. My boots never truly dried. When you wake to a wet blanket every day, you learn to love any heat you can steal. You breathe in your sleeves. You hold your tea over the steam pipes until the cup burns your palm and you thank it. That run started like any other. We had ice on the rails by the second day out. The sea was a slab of iron with broken teeth. The convoy crept. We swept. The radio kept its mouth shut unless we had to speak. Morse chattered now and then, clipped and brisk. Weather reports lied as usual. Grim, they said, as if grim meant something new up there. The only fresh thing that week was the sky one evening. The clouds split for an hour. We got a mean sunset, all sickly gold on hammered gray. Lads lined the deck and smoked like kings. Someone said, "Look, the world remembered we exist." Then the wind came back and laughed at us. At the tail of that day, while I scraped rust and thought about sleep, Stokes Jones leaned over and said, "You hear the one about the serpent that can circle the world?" I said, "Piss off." He said, "Old Norse lot knew their water. They called it Jörmungandr. Roll off the tongue like you swallowed a fishbone." I told him the only serpent I cared about came in a U-boat uniform. He grinned, stubbed his fag, and went below to sweat with his boilers. I did not know I would remember that name when the deck was red and the sky had no sound. We were between Iceland and Greenland then, a nowhere lane in a nowhere sea. The chart said coordinates. My bones felt cold. We did not see the thing that first day. We did not hear it either. We just did our jobs and laughed at stories. I thought the worst that week would be a wolf pack. I would have given a finger to swap what came for a belly full of U-boats. Funny how you can be wrong in a way you never knew was possible. That night the watch changed like it was meant to. Bells, footsteps, muttered passwords. The sea leaned us left and then right. I wrapped my coat tighter, took a breath that cut my lungs, and thought about sleep that would never come easy again. It started shrug small. The sort of thing you chalk to bad weather or a hungover sensor. The sonar lads called up an odd one. Big. Slow. Too slow for a boat. The contact crept beneath the convoy like a lazy whale that had learned to hold its breath forever. Bearing shifted a hair. Range stayed stupid. Depth readouts gave a number and then gave nothing. The set pinged and then seemed to swallow its own ping. We argued round the mess over mugs that burned and fingers that would not warm. Cheese said temperature layers can bend sound. Submarines play with that. Another lad said, "Whales." Someone else said, "Ice." Drift ice scrapes and knocks and makes weird music. The XO listened, nodded, told them all to write it up neat and pass it to the bridge. He had that face officers use when they want you calm, stern, open, a bit bored. Like weather was a paperwork issue. Night watch went weird next. Wind died for a spell. Sea stayed angry anyway. You expected the whitecaps to lay down when the air went slack. They did not. Big, slow swells rolled through like something down below was breathing. The ship lifted and sank with no gust pushing the tops off the waves. I have been tossed in Atlantic soup enough to know the feel. This was not wind. This was the sea moving because it felt like moving. The helmsman swore and corrected again. The compass swung lazy arcs. You could feel resistance on the rudder like the water pushed back with manly hands. The skipper came to the wing and stared at nothing, lips a thin line. He did not speak for a full minute. Then he told the helmsman to keep the zigzag exact. No slack, no lazy turns. If wolves were near, we did not need to gift them a straight line. Morning stank of dead fish. That is not me trying to be fancy. I mean the smell hit us like a slap. We came on deck, and the sea around the convoy wore a slick of white bellies and torn silver sides. Cod, herring, some big lads I could not name, all floating like someone had boiled the water and let them rise. We leaned over the rail and squinted. No oil sheen from a hit. No debris that says blast. Just fish. The sea had coughed them up and lost interest. A few of the older hands crossed themselves in a slapdash way, and then looked around to make sure no one saw. One of the young officers laughed too loud. He said, "Sulfur pockets, right?" Volcanic nonsense. Geology underwater can burp and steal the air out of the sea and fish die and pop. He said it like a book. The chief boatswain muttered that he had never seen that stretch do it. Not once. Not this hard. By noon the dead were gone. Gulls came screaming and sat fat on the water. Who knew there were so many gulls that far out? We fed them with bits of bread while we smoked and pretended it was another day. The sonar boys were getting edgy. They started snapping at each other. One had a raw groove across his hair from hours in the cans. He came up to smoke and would not meet anyone's eyes. I asked him, "What do you hear?" He said, "Nothing." But it is a kind of nothing that sounds like something holding its breath. He said he knew that made no sense, and then tossed his cigarette into the wake like it had offended him. By dark, the wind was back, nasty. The big swells did not stop. We were riding two rhythms, wind chop on top of slow lifts that made your stomach think about mutiny. The lads whispered sea monster rubbish because whispering into a gale makes you feel tougher. I told Jones he could stuff his Norse tales. He grinned and said I would be sorry when the world coil came up to say hello. I told him he'd be sorry when I shoved him in a coal bin. Officers dismissed our nerves with the usual talk. Keep your heads. Bad weather and nerves can make deckhands see ghosts. Focus on your job. Watch your fingers when the lines go taut. Check your life belt. Drink your tea. The skipper added that wolves smell fear and fancy stories are as good as a radio flare. He was right, in his way. But he was arguing with the sea, and the sea never loses an argument. Late that night, I took a piss off the stern and watched the phosphorescence smear green under the wake. Pretty as a fairy tale if fairy tales smelled of oil. The green glow pulsed a slow beat. Not the quick fizz you get when the prop bites. A slow, steady throb. I told myself it was swell timing and moonlight we did not have. Then the ship lifted again with no help from wind. My bladder finished the job on its own. We found a handful of dead fish on deck the next morning. High on the foredeck where even a big wave would have to try. They looked chewed, but the teeth marks were long and shallow. Not the work of shark. More like they had been pressed between planks until they popped. The chief tossed them back and said, "Coy as you please, that gulls drop rubbish for fun." We all pretended to believe him. By then you could feel it in the air. That little electric lick the skin gets before a scrap. Men polished the same bit of brass twice. Fags were smoked down to the nub. Laughter was a notch too loud and ended a beat too soon. We were not scared of U-boats. That fear was normal. This was sideways. A dread that had no face. Instinct putting its hand on your shoulder and squeezing. We kept working because that is what you do. We watched the convoy plod on, blacked out shapes sliding in and out of fog like giants who wanted to be left alone. We listened to the set and heard what it could not tell us. Big, slow, deep then not deep, there and not there. Officers called it nuisance noise, layers, the ice-making fools of sound. We nodded and went below to whisper different words. Serpent, worm, the big coil. The big coil. The third night, a tramp steamer mid-column took a slap from below that lifted her bow clean. I watched it. That is how clear the memory is. We were cutting across their front on a patrol arc. Fog peeled back in a ragged tear, and there she was, tired old thing with a rust smile, chugging on. Then her nose came up like someone had put a jack under it and cranked. The stern dug in, water shed off her plates in a sheet. She hung there a second, wrong as a church in a brothel, then slammed back down and kept going like she wanted to pretend nothing happened. The radio stayed shut. No one wanted to give wolves a sniff, but we heard voices over the short range, panicked and clipped. Men swearing they saw a coil, not a wave, a coil. A curve of something black and ridged easing out of the water and pressing up. A ridge wider than any whale. Long as the ship is wide, a deckhand cried. His mate told him to shut it. The mate's voice shook. We cut across again and watched the tramp. She was riding lighter in the bow now. Her plates sang a note ships sing when they are not happy. No torpedo wake had been seen. No oil smell apart from our own. The sonar set gave us the old game. Contact like a mountain, moving like a slow dream, then nothing. We dropped a pattern of charges because that is what you do when something touches a ship under your nose and you do not see a periscope. Depth charges punch and roll your guts. You feel the boat shiver all the way to your teeth. The sea boiled up in dark knuckles where they went. Nothing floated up after. No oil, no wood, no mercy. The chief said we probably scared a whale. The sonar boy behind him made a face like he wanted to say a word that was not whale, but he bit his tongue. The skipper had told us all to keep our mouths tight. The convoy tightened up. The Commodore liked neat lines when trouble smelled close. Neat lines make clean targets for torpedoes, but chaos makes worse targets for escorts. Pick your poison. We kept the zigzag sharp. We laid smoke when the fog lifted. We shifted speed by orders from a hand that knew how the wolves think. We did all the textbook things while trying not to think about coils. The next day the tramp limped, bow down. Spray coming in the forecastle like an unwanted guest. Men on our foredeck lashed tarps and cursed. They waved at us. We waved back. No light hearts on that wave. Blackout rules, but hands still lift. At mess, I heard news stories from other ships passed on like contraband. A fireman from a liner said he had seen a ridge turn in the water with a sheen like wet slate and a row of nicks along it like old scars. A gunner from a corvette swore he smelled old rot when the swell came. Not fish, not oil, something too old to name. I told them they were drunk on cold. Then I drank my tea and found it tasted like pennies. The officers stamped it out fast. The XO stopped by the mess and told us to cut the fairy tales. The skipper's orders clear as day, no spreading tales about coils or ridges or monsters. We were to report only what we could prove. If we saw a periscope, call it. If we saw a wake, call it. If we saw God, keep it to ourselves and get on with our jobs. He did not smile. He did not blink much either. That afternoon, the set picked up the big slow thing again. We dropped another small pattern of charges as a nudge and a warning. The sea rolled back, black and thick and angry. Some of the lads whooped without enthusiasm. We wanted to believe powder solved everything. The sonar said nothing after. But the crew did not relax. You could feel the tension like a wire wound too tight. Even the gulls found a new place to scream. That night, the fog ate the world. You could not see a man across the deck unless he was ghost white. We shut our mouths and listened to engines, ours and theirs, the whole convoy, a heartbeat you could hear through steel. And under it, maybe, something else. A slow scrape, a slow drag, a sound like a rope across stone. You know how sometimes you hear your house settle and you tell yourself it is just timber? It was like that, but the house was water and the timber was a legend with bad manners. We all turned in because orders, sleep, stand to, eat, clean, repeat. But the mess was quiet, cards not played, jokes not told. Someone said a prayer. Someone else told him to stuff it because God had bigger problems. The ship rolled and sighed and the screws bit and sometimes hesitated like they hit a thicker patch of sea. By morning, the tramp had a starboard list you could see with one eye half shut. Still no radio call. The convoy pretended hard. Pretend is part of survival. We pretended it was wolves or ice. We pretended all our drills mean something in a world that has more teeth than we can count. We pretended so we could keep doing the work. The chief gave us extra cleaning that day. When men are scared, you give them something to scrub. Hands busy, mind quiet, that is the idea. We scrubbed until our knuckles were raw. The deck shone like a mirror for a minute before the next wave salted it. If you had come aboard, you would have said, "What a tidy ship." You would not have seen the way lads kept glancing at the sea like it had an answer. By dusk, the dead fish smell came back, not as strong. Enough to make soup taste of death. A small thing shook me more than the big ones. We found a bit of rope flayed through in the bosun's locker. It had been sound, good hemp, tied with a neat eye. Now it looked like something had worried it like a dog. No rats aboard. No rough handling, just fibers fluffed and torn. We shrugged and spliced and tugged, but I slid the cut bit into my pocket without thinking why. We were not children. We were sailors in a bad sea and a hard year. We had seen men die and ships split and oil burn, but dread is not a measure of experience. It is a taste at the back of the tongue. It is the way you count the seconds between pings and wish the numbers were different. It is the way you start a story with a laugh and end it with a cough. The tramp did not make it to morning. Fog again, thick as fleece. The convoy's horns moaned to each other like lonely cows. We kept station by stopwatches and dead reckoning and swearing. Sometime between midnight and dawn, a ship vanished. No bang, no flare, no wake surfacing like a white scar. 1 minute she was a noise in the fog and a faint shadow off our port. Next minute, nothing. We did not know until the spacing went wrong. The Commodore sent a message around telling ships to check their positions and speeds. We counted hulls with eyes and ears. The numbers did not add up. The radio could not find her, no SOS, no calls. Just a gap that smelled like cold iron and bad weather. We swung wide and hunted. Our sonar gave us a pressure surge from below that made the needles kick. It felt like standing over a subway when a train slides under you, rush and suck, and a pressure that hits your guts. The helmsman swore as the wheel tugged against his hands. We dropped a pattern, big one. No mucking about. The charges thumped and rolled the fog in greasy folds. The sea came up hard in dark boils. Then it went quiet in that way. Quiet can be loud. The lads on the guns argued, eyes rimmed red from strain. Some muttered about the serpent without lowering their voices now. The old boatswain, who had no patience for foolishness, told them to speak less and coil the lines tighter. His hands shook. I saw it. He saw me see it and tucked them in his sleeves. The skipper did not like ghosts. He asked the set again and again. Range? Bearing? Anything I can shoot? The operator kept giving him numbers that meant too big and too slow and too everywhere. Thermal layers, the XO said. The sea is layered like a cake. Sound bends and you get lies. He sounded like the manual. He looked like he wanted to punch the ocean. We fired off more charges over the next hours than I liked. Not wasteful, not blind, but more than a comfortable number. They pounded our ribs and made the deck jump. Each time, nothing. No streaks of oil. No timber, no bodies. You get used to men turning into oil stains. You do not get used to men turning into nothing. By noon, the fog shredded into a low smear. We could see pieces of the convoy now, black shapes with white noses of spray. The sea had that bad winter texture, like skin pulled too tight over bone. The wind cut clean. The dead fish smell hung around a bit and then gave up. We kept to our zigzags. There is a pattern to the movement, a math that makes it hard for a torpedo to guess where you will be by the time it gets there. We had been dancing that dance for months. The helmsman did his counts, swung us left, held, corrected, swung us right. The screws bit hard, the stern jittered, the bow punched spray. We were a tidy destroyer doing tidy work in a place that wanted to make a mess. Late afternoon, the set found it again. The shape. Huge. Huge, the operator said. Bigger than anything I have seen, even when we caught a school of whales wrong. He said it like he was confessing a sin. Depth unstable. Sometimes deep, deep. Sometimes just below us, shifting. Moving too slow for a boat and too steady for drift. The skipper told him to mark it anyway, and handed the bearing to the guns out of habit. No one likes being empty-handed. We threw a pattern to bracket the last good fix. They dropped off the rails with that cheery thunk that means trouble is leaving in a hurry. The sea threw them back as white fountains. The pressure wave slapped us. The men on the forward gun yelped as spray came over. Nothing savable came up after. We looked at each other and did not say the word that sat on all our tongues. At dusk, a corvette on our starboard quarter rolled wrong and did not roll back right. She had been close, too close. You would say idiot seamanship in peacetime. In that fog and fear, you forgive. She went over, stuck at an angle that made your back hurt to watch, then flipped, fast. Some of her lads jumped early. The ones who waited rode her belly up like a capsized beetle before they went under. No explosion, no torpedo. She was fine, and then she was a coffin. We raced. We threw lines and lifebuoys. The sea took back most of what we offered in a hurry. We dragged in a handful, blue and blind and gasping. One kept saying, I saw it, like a broken gramophone. He could not say what it was. His teeth chattered so hard he bit his own tongue and did not notice. Blood ran down his chin, pink in the spray. The sonar set spat out more of the same. Pressure surges. Big, slow, an absence in sound. A shadow that was not a shadow. The operator lifted his cans and rubbed his ears like the fault was in him. He swore at the machine. He placed his head back to the cups like a sinner putting a forehead to a stone. Men stopped pretending by then. They muttered serpent in daylight. They spat over the side for luck like their grandfathers did. The priest on the liner said a public prayer against orders, voice thrown thin by wind. No one told him off. You want realism? Fine. We did the real things. We cleaned the ice off the rails with wooden mallets. We used sand on the deck to stop sliding. We counted the seconds between pings. We logged bearing changes. We kept smoke ready in case a U-boat surfaced. We stacked shells near the guns and kept the fuses dry. We ate bread that broke like slate and meat that came out of a tin and looked like a pale brain. We took turns sleeping in wet wool because there was no dry wool left. We wrote letters with cramped hands and promised lies. Through it all, we felt something below us that was bigger than any sum of steel and habit. It moved with the convoy like it owned the lane. The sea rose without wind. The set told us there was a hole in the sound where something should be. The dead fish came and went. The gulls circled like they knew a secret. In the small hours, Stokes Jones sat beside me and let his head thump the bulkhead in time with the ship. He said, "I told you, Jörmungandr, world serpent, big bastard." I told him to shut up or I would toss him over by his braces. He shut up. We both kept staring at the deck anyway, like we thought we might see a scale press up through the steel. We were armed to hurt steel and men. We were not armed to argue with myths. The skipper had enough of shadows. He was not a reckless man. He was a professional at being careful in places that hate professionals. On the fourth day since the first odd ping, he called officers to the chart table and spoke soft. Then he came out to the bridge wing and gave the order that put our noses down, we would hunt it. If it was a boat, we would find it. If it was whales, we would scare them away from our charges. If it was ice, we would chart it and not get a ship killed by a blind bump. If it was a story, we would end it with a laugh and extra rum. The Commodore's signals stayed stiff, but he did not forbid us. Escorts often peeled off a mile or two to nip at ghosts. The wolves liked that, but the wolves were quiet. Too quiet. The sea had another mouth to feed. We ran out wide, nose into the wind, spray cold enough to peel skin. The sonar boy lined up on the bearing that had the big nothing sitting on it and called ranges that changed like slow football scores. The sea lifted us at weird times. The helmsman swore under his breath and made her dance the zigzags anyway because habit beats fear. We laid a deliberate pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. The deck crew ran like a well-oiled sin. The lines sang. The cans went off with a cheerful clonk that sounds like work well done until it makes your ears ring from the thumps 4 seconds later. The sea tore itself up where they went. The plume nearest the stern hit us with spray and a slap that put men on their knees. Then the ocean moved wrong. I do not mean a wave. I do not mean chop. I mean a piece of sea the size of a warehouse rose like a table flipping. The water hill grew a spine. I saw it. I swear on my dead that I saw it. A ridge under the water, darker than the sea, wider than our deck by far, coming up slow like something stiff waking. Water streamed off something that was not water. The hill rolled under us. The screws bit air, then screamed. The stern kicked like a mule. A petty officer went down the ladder faster than intended and came up with blood on his nose and a grin like he had been slapped by a girl he liked. He tried to say a joke and bit his tongue again. The corvette to starboard got it worse. The hill hit her beam. She rolled over until her deck was vertical. Men clung to whatever they could. Then the hill dropped out from under. She slammed back. You could hear her frames complain over the wind. On the bridge, the skipper's jaw muscle went tight enough to cut wire. We launched another spread because men with death charges know only one cure for things underwater. This time we timed it over where the hill had been. I was on the forward deck getting a lash on a line that had come loose when I saw something breach. It started as a black arc. It grew until my brain took an extra second to catch up. A coil. Not like a rope, like a railway tunnel trying to leave the ground. Wet, ridged, scored with old scars. It came up slow, as if curious. The skin was not smooth. It looked like tough plates laid in rows, a snake in armor. Water ran off it in sheets and strings. Under the sheet, a pattern of dark diamonds caught what light there was and made it look like the thing was alive with little glints. Then an eye. Christ help me. We did not know where the head was until the eye lifted. It was not glowing, not itself, but it picked up the light from our lanterns and the pale sky and threw it back dead, like a cat's eye in a black tunnel, big as a man's chest, watching the ship as if we were something it could taste later. The forward gun opened because a man will shoot any eye that looks at him like that. The shell hit the coil and did the stupidest thing. It bounced. I do not mean a rubber ball bounce. It struck, burst, threw sparks and chips of something, and the blast ran along the ridges without biting deep. The eye slid closed and then opened again like a bored god. We all fired, every gun that could bear. Pom-pom chattered. The Oerlikon spat. The main gun spoke with that flat crack that makes your bones say, "Yes, sir." Spray masked most of our sin. When it cleared, the coil had sunk a little and turned. The eye was out of sight. The shape eased back under the surface like a man lowering into a hot bath. It did not rush. It did not flinch. It simply did not care. The charges went off below. The sea heaved like a beast, shrugging. The sound came back through the hull in ugly notes. For a moment I thought we had heard it because the water boiled with more than blast. Then the boil moved, fast, not random. It circled. We had poked something that could take a poke and give change back. A smaller escort. A trawler turned into a warship by paint and desperation, caught a wave crosswise and capsized. Men on her screamed until the next roll swallowed them. I saw one jump clear and try to swim. He went under without thrashing, like something grabbed his leg and pulled him gentle and firm. The sea closed as if it had always been smooth. We were sailors who had seen dumb luck and bad luck, and the ordinary luck that kills men for being wet and cold on a weekday. This was new. Horror clicked in like a gun into battery. We were not fighting machines. We were not dealing with angles and ranges and fuse settings. We were in a story older than steel, and the story did not give a damn about us. The skipper kept his voice level when he gave the next set of orders. His eyes had gone far away. A man can do that, put his soul somewhere else and let his mouth move. He told the helmsman to give us some stern and some guts. He told the gunnery officer to keep firing at anything that broke the surface. He told the depth charge party to lay a curtain, not a neat row. Flood it, scare it, hurt it if God was taking requests. We slung metal into water until the racks went light. The sea hit back by being everywhere at once. The coil surfaced on our port far off, then on starboard closer. A shape rolled just beneath, huge and slow. The set went mad, then dumb. The operators cursed. Men on the guns cried for targets like starving men asking for bread. To see a thing that large move with grace is wrong. Ships move like they fight the sea. This thing moved like it owned it. It rose, it breathed, it went under, and the surface bent to its will. Spray came off it in banners. The scales called them plates, called them scutes, called them your worst idea of skin showed ridges that would scrape a hull to bits by hugging it. We shot until our shoulders were bruised and the barrels were hot. I saw a shell burst on the ridge and draw off scales like broken tiles. The bits hit the deck with a clack. One skittered to my boot. It was heavy and smelled like old stone after rain, not fish. I grabbed it on a stupid impulse. It cut my palm. The blood looked redder than usual against that gray world. The creature, and I am done calling it anything but a creature, breached far off once more. Full. Not a coil. A chunk of body so tall it made our gun mounts look like toys. I caught a half glimpse of a head at the long, far arc of its body. Not a dragon's. Not a snake's. Something built to push water away forever. The mouth was a long cut with edges like a crushed anvil. When it closed, the sound would have been mistaken for thunder if we did not hear it through steel. We kept firing. The shells did what they do to bad armor: shatter, glance, bite shallow. The pom-poms stitched a line that made bright sparks and dark bruises. The Oerlikon rounds chewed a bit of the edge and did nothing to the meat. Horror set in deep. Not the screaming kind, but the quiet kind where men go efficient to save something inside for later. Ammo lines neat. Orders crisp. Eyes fixed on sights. Even Jones had no jokes. He only stared at the water, like it had told him a secret he didn't want. We were in survival, not war. War has rules. Survival has one. Breathe again. The convoy blew apart, not literally, but ships scattered like men running when a pub fight goes bad. Horns moaned. Engines changed pitches as captains panicked and then remembered they were being watched by wolves too. You could feel a fleet's worth of men thinking the same thought: die to torpedoes or die to the serpent. Pick. Two freighters kissed hard in the murk and tore each other's sides. One caught fire on deck. Oil burned in a strip that flickered like a bad dream. The flames made the fog glow copper. Men on the rails looked like shadows in an old photograph. Some jumped and vanished. Some hung back with faces stuck like paper to glass. The serpent, yes, I will say it, played. It circled. It would lift a coil here and push water wrong there. It would slide under a hull and ride it slow so the ship rose wrong and men lost their footing and lines snapped like bones. It would let its plates scrape and make a note you feel in your teeth. It took men who fell and did not give them back. It did not hurry. It did not rush. It was a thing without doubt moving through a world that had always been its. HMS Valor took a proper hit. We felt the pressure first, a grip under the keel. The ship sagged then stiffened. Steel complains a certain way when it is pushed beyond manners. Then something pressed along the port side like a giant hand with sandpaper. Plates screeched. Rivets groaned. The hull dented inward with a noise that made my heart kick. We did not flood hard lucky angle or thick luck, but the power flickered like a dying lamp. The lights went out in the engine room for a count of 3, came back, and the lads down there swore so loud the deck could hear. The radio popped and spat, then died when a spar fell and smashed it like a man stamping a bug. No SOS. No chatter. We were on our own in a crowd. We tried to turn away and got told otherwise by the sea. The helm answered late because the rudder had taken a scrape. The screws bit odd. You could feel the vibration change, a new wobble that says something down there is not right. The skipper gripped the rail until his knuckles went white. He told the engineer to give him steady, and the engineer said he would give him a miracle if he could find one. Men started losing their nerve. Not screaming, not running. The quiet kind of panic where a man's hands get stupid. A line you have tied 1,000 times comes out wrong. A fuse gets set sloppy. You look at a gauge and your brain reads numbers that are not there. The bosun did his best. He laid hands on a couple of lads and spoke low and mean. He gave them jobs that needed doing. Splice this. Carry that. Stay busy. We put smoke across our wake even though smoke is for wolves. Maybe the serpent will cough, I thought. Stupid thought. The wind tore it anyway. The fog made it into more fog. A destroyer runs on noise and will. Ours started to cough. The coil press had bent a shaft, a hair, or fouled something just enough to make her hum wrong. You could feel it in your feet. The skipper noticed and set his jaw. He told us we were not dead yet. He told us we would not be dead if we kept breathing and kept fighting. He told us this to keep our heads from hearing the other voice in the sea that said, "All your drills are toys." The radio went properly dead when a bit of the mast, cracked by the last bad roll, let go and took the aerial with it. It bounced down, hit the set room window, and made glass into pebbles. The operator stood amid a glitter of shards and looked like he had been made of paper, and someone had crumpled him. He said sorry to the set like it was a woman he had failed. Isolation is a taste. It tastes like tinfoil and old pennies. We tasted it until our mouths went numb. No calls in, no calls out. The convoy was a muffled mess of horns and shouts and occasional gunfire when someone saw a periscope that was a wave. We looked to our own deck and tried to make it smaller. Night came with mean quickness. North Atlantic nights in late autumn are not built for men. The sky closes. The wind cuts. The water takes on a polished look that tricks your eye. The serpent liked the dark. Why would it not? It had always lived in the kind of dark light is scared of. We kept lamps shaded and off. We kept our voices low. We watched the sea because the sea was watching us back. Somewhere aft, a lad laughed once, high and thin. Someone hit him in the shoulder and told him to save it for later. He said he was not laughing. His face agreed. Sometimes fear leaks out of you in the wrong sound. We took stock. Ammo lowish but not empty. Charges down to a pattern or two. Torpedoes, a couple left in the tubes, and a couple more we could rid with time we did not have. Engines hurt but alive. Rudder stiff but answering. Crew scratched, cut, bruised, still too many of us to fit in the boats if it came to that. A bad tally with worse outside the numbers. The skipper stood on the wing, coat open, cap pulled down so the rain could not trick him. He looked like a statue someone had left in a storm as a joke. He turned to the XO and said a thing I did not expect to hear from a man who loved charts. He said, "If it comes again, we will ram. We will put steel where myth keeps its heart." The XO nodded like he had known that was where this was going. Somewhere out there, something big rolled under the moonless sky and the swell lifted us slow, like we were breathing with it. The set pinged and returned nothing. I listened hard and heard my own blood in my ears. We were alone. The convoy was a smear of ghosts. The wolves were quiet. The serpents circled. We waited for morning or for a mouth. Dawn came like a bruise, no sunlight. Just a lighter shade of dead. The sea was a skin stretched over something alive. We could see 3 ships properly, 2 more as smudges, and the rest as rumors. Smoke hung low and mean. Oil slicks ran in thin rainbows where the wind could not rip them. Wreckage bobbed stupid and sad. The skipper called us together by job. Gunnery, charges, torpedoes. Damage control, he said it flat. We will make a stand. We will gather the ships we can. We will hit this bastard, and then we will get the convoy moving again. If we cannot do the first, the second will not matter. He did not say, "You have all done well." He did not say, "I am proud." He saved that for another world. He ordered the last torpedoes brought to bear. He told the gunnery chief to get eyes on the water and not blink. He told the charges team to prep the last patterns to lay on command, not on habit. The engine room came over the voice pipe with a cough and a promise. "We can give you speed, but not for long. It will bend itself into a pretzel if you ask too much." The skipper said, "Bend." The serpent obliged by showing itself. No coin now. It came up port side, half a mile out, a long curve of body breaking the surface in 3 places like islands. Then the head, proper this time. It broke the skin of the sea like an oar, and then the mouth came after, long and edged. Water fell from it in strings that caught what light there was and made it look like it wore a coat of needles. Men froze. Then they moved. Guns tracked. Men shouted ranges. Someone said, "Jesus, low and honest." I had the bit of scale in my pocket still, stupid, heavy. I gripped it because a child's charm is still a charm. The head turned and looked at us. Not the eye we had seen before. The other. The pupil was a slit set in old glass. It did not blaze. It did not boil. It just looked and judged and found us bread. We fired. All barrels. The main gun threw a shell that hit near the base of the neck and burst. Chips flew. The beast twitched like a horse flicking a fly. The pom-pom rattled the string that walked the side of the jaw. The oerlikons stitched bright little nails along the edges of plates. The head dipped, not fast, then came back up. It opened its mouth a little, just enough to show a line of something, not teeth, not in rows like a shark, nothing pretty, just edges of bone grown to break things. When it closed, the sound ran up our bones. Torpedoes. The skipper held his hand and then dropped it. Fire. The tube spat. There is a feeling when you send fish out that is like releasing breath you have held a day. The wakes ran pale lines toward a shadow more than a target. The serpent did not dodge. Maybe you do not dodge when the world is yours. Maybe you cannot see underwater where steel fish swim. The first torpedo hit. You know the thump. It is a bang that gets eaten by the sea and arrives late in your gut. The water bulged. A plume rose. The coil lifted and slapped down like someone had dropped a building. The second hit near the rear of what we guessed was the neck. The water punched up there too. The serpent convulsed. The sea went mad around it. That head came down fast, then came up and looked wrong. Parts of the plate pattern near the blow hung in shreds. Old blood, dark and thick, came up in ropes and spread a stain that even that ocean could not swallow at once. For a second, the world paused. Then it came alive in hate. The serpent drove for us. Not fast in speed terms. Fast in intent. It used water like a spring. It drove its bulk under and came up off our bow, big enough that I felt the world tilt around it. It came down without touching us. The wave from its body slammed our deck and threw men flat. A gun lead got wrenched. The shield bent. The gunnery chief stood again, with blood in his eye, and did his maths anyway. We fired again. A shell took a chunk out near the mouth. Another hit a plate that finally decided to let go and peeled it like a scab. The beast did not scream, no voice. Just that sick thunder as it moved and broke water. It slammed a coil around our midships like a lazy man tossing a rope around a post. The plates ground on steel. The hull groaned like a church organ. Rivets near me popped and turned into little bullets. One clipped my ear. Hot. The deck pitched. Men grabbed anything that would not leave. The coil tightened. You could feel the ship's back try to arch and fail. Steam lines banged in the guts. A pipe burst and hissed white. The engine room shouted on the pipe that they were losing pressure. The serpent gave a little more squeeze, like a boxer judging his grip. The deck buckled a finger's width near the aft hatch. The bosun put his palm on it like he could push it back. Depth charges at point blank are suicide. The skipper did it anyway. He told the party to roll 2 off the stern and set them shallow. The lads ran like saints with bombs. They rolled them off. The coils were not holding our stern proper. They sank and went pop a handful of seconds later. The blast slapped the serpent's hide under us and punched the hull up into our feet. The coil loosened. Not much. Enough to breathe once. The creature surged, coil released, and reared its head over the forward deck. I stood there like an idiot with a scale in one hand and a loader's handle in the other. The mouth came down and snapped a bite out of the deck edge like a baker tearing bread. Steel screamed. A man near me, named Taff, was there and then not there. No blood. Just gone into a cut bigger than a man's fear. We hammered it. Close. You could see the plates crack under repeated bursts. Smaller rounds chewed the softer bits between plates where old scars had made weakness. The main gun could not depress enough. The crew fired anyway, and the shell ripped through a curve of flesh and burst in a fountain of water, and something that splattered the deck like tar. It stank of old rivers. The serpent thrashed. That is the word. It was not a fight. It was a thing caught between hurt and rage. The head swung across the deck. It hit the base of a gun and tore it off its mount. Men went with it into the gray and died without sound. The coil came up under the bridge and pressed. The windows bowed in and then burst. Glass went in. The skipper stood with blood on his face and his cap still on. He shouted, and I heard it like thunder in a tin. He shouted, "Engine room, overheat the bastards." He shouted, "Torpedo room, flood what you have left." He shouted, "Helm, ahead full." Ramming speed is a stupid phrase from books. This was the closest I have seen. We had hurt the thing. The torpedo hits had made it bleed and slacken. It moved with a hitch now. It gave us a window small and mean. The skipper took it like a thief. He put the bow down and told the engineer to give him everything. The engineer said, "She will not like it." The skipper said, "I am not marrying her." The engineer laughed like he had a bullet in his lung and then made the engine sing a high, ugly song. We aimed not for the head, for the body where the plates met and were cracked. The helmsman held that line like a man praying through his hands. The serpent realized late, if a mind like that realizes. It started to turn away, a slow, graceful arc. We would miss. The skipper swore once and spun us a hair. The bow cut water and then cut something else. We hit it like hitting a stone under a current. The bow crumpled in slow motion and then all at once. Steel folded. Men flew. I went forward and hit a bollard with my ribs. Pain went white like winter. The sound when steel meets not steel that is still harder is something I do not have a word for. The serpent's body gave, then rallied, then tore. Plates ripped. Old scars opened new. Dark blood burst out, hot and wrong. It poured over the deck and made the world stink like a dead thunderstorm. The skipper had one more trick. He had told the engine room to set the engines to run past safe. He had told the electrical boys to make the batteries misbehave. He had told the charge party to ready every can we had left with fuses set to a kiss. We were a bomb wearing a ship's coat. He told us to clear the bow if we could still move. He told the ones near the boats to get them ready. He said it quiet now, like a man telling a dog to go home. He kept his hand on the rail like it would tell him if the sea planned a new sin. The serpent wrapped us again, smaller, tighter, angrier. It tried to squeeze, and the swelling engines and the stress made the hull sing with a high, terrible note. The deck bent. The plates near the strike began to part. The charge party rolled cans into the mess and set their fuses by shaking hands. We had time for a breath. 2. The skipper took his cap off. He wiped his forehead where blood had run into his eye. He put the cap back on. He looked down the deck at us and gave a nod you give at the end of a night when the pub throws you out and you are all still alive. The engines went from scream to a tone so pure it felt holy. Then the world tore. Light, sound, heat, not like a shell, not like a bomb ashore. A tearing, steel becoming shrapnel, air becoming pain, water becoming a wall that lifted you and threw you away from the only thing you have that floats. The blast ate our bow and half our guts and punched into the serpent through the rents we had made. Plates blew off it like leaves, flesh tore in long strips. Old bones cracked like badly made pottery. Dark blood turned the sea into soup. I do not remember the next bit except small pieces. I saw the serpent rear head high like a thing trying to leave its own death. I saw its eye go blind, not close, just stop being. I saw the skipper still on the wing, smile small, then vanish into smoke. I saw Jones grip the rail and scream something that was not words, then go over as the rail tore loose. I saw the deck lift under me, then felt cold like a knife, and then nothing. Cold hit first, like knives, then dark, then noise went thin. I came up choking, mouth full of oil and teeth. Sky was a smear, sea was a hammer. Valor was gone, only bits left, planks, hatch covers, a bent ladder. Smoke lay low, tasting of burnt rubber and pennies. I clung to a spar, felt splinters in my palms. Waves rolled me like laundry. Men shouted, then did not. I called for Jones. Nothing. Called for the skipper. Wind answered. The serpent was still there. Hurt. I felt it before I saw it. A long lift under the water. Slow, mean. Slow, mean. Then a shape rolled just under the skin of the sea. Plates torn. Dark blood and ropes sliding past. The head came up once at distance. Crooked now. One-eyed dead glass. It hung there like a broken crane, then slid down. No thrash. No roar. Just gone. The swell sagged as if the ocean let out a breath it had held for 1,000 years. Bits of us burned on the water. Quiet flames. Oil carried them away. I paddled with one arm. Other was dead weight toward a voice. Found a Carly float. 2 lads already aboard. We dragged one more over. He threw up black and red, and then slept with eyes open. We did not have room for another, but we made room because that is what you do. Dawn came slow and sour. Fog thinned. Wreckage everywhere. A mast jutting like a snapped tooth. A lifeboat upside down with hands clamped to the keel until the hands slipped. Gulls came late. Even they seemed spooked. We counted. Not many to count. A few floats. A boat from a freighter with 7 souls in a hole. A raft with 2 corpses frozen into it like bad ornaments. We tied what we could together with line and hope. Wind pushed us east. Cold bit ankles first, then knees, then belly. Hunger rode pillion. Time went stupid. We drifted days. Maybe more. We rationed on old biscuit from a tool bag and rain caught in a tarpaulin. One lad's foot went black. He did not complain. He just watched the horizon, then hummed something Welsh and ugly. At night, the sea talked in little clicks and knocks. I flinched at each one. Sometimes, in the deep evening, we saw a bulge far off. A hill moving by itself. We said nothing. You do not call a thing back by naming it. Better to keep your tongue and your breath. A corvette found us at last. Thin men in thicker coats hauled us up like nets. We did not cheer. We could not. They wrapped us. They put mugs to our mouths. I tasted heat and cried like a fool into my tea. Retold them. All of it. Torpedo hits that were ours, not from wolves. Coils, plates, the ram, the blast, the head, the blood, the blood. They listened. The doctor dosed us like bad children. Officers wrote neat. They nodded at the right places. Later, someone stamped papers, and by the time my hands stopped shaking, it was U-boat hysteria in the book. Wolves. Layers. Panic. A destroyer lost to noble duty. Nothing about a world coil. Weeks later, a man in a clean coat asked the same questions with a softer voice and eyes like door bolts. He collected my cut piece of scale from the kit bag I should not have kept. Said it was slag. Said I must have picked it off a blown fitting. Took it anyway. File closed. Years rolled. I went ashore. Married. Worked. Breathed. Nights still taste of oil if I let them. Every old sailor has ghosts. Mine smells like cold iron and old river mud. Here is the bit I do not say in pubs. 2 years after, a corvette ran that same lane. Quiet sea. No wolves. Her set picked a contact too big for the page. Moving slow. The operator wrote, possible ice. He scratched the word out. Wrote, no action. He told a mate later he felt the water lift under his boots with no wind. Maybe it sleeps. Maybe it moved on. Maybe the world is wide and our charts are small. I only know this. Sometimes the sea breathes wrong. When it does, I keep my mouth shut and my life belt tight. So that's the end of our video. If you made it this far, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free. And if you want more terrifying encounters like this one, check out the other videos on screen right now. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. See you soon.